Today's panel is going to be around Backstage and the developer experience. So just going to do a quick round of introductions first. My name is Serena Chechile. I'm a product manager in the Developer Tools organization, working on developer experience, both in the OpenShift console as well as around our Backstage offerings.
Hi, my name is Satish Puranam. I'm the Cloud Strategy Manager at Ford, and I'm also owner of Kubernetes services at Ford.
Hey, Adam. I'm a manager in our Cloud Native and App Development group at Deloitte, doing a lot of cloud engineering for government customers and some of our global collaborative products.
Randeep Khaund, Deloitte as well. I'm a senior manager in our modern software engineering practice, and I focus on a lot of our commercial clients. We're trying to solve a lot of the platform pain points.
And I'm Christophe Fargette, architect at Red Hat, working on the Backstage and Genius communities, as well as our productized offerings.
Okay, so our first question is going to be for somebody in Deloitte, one of you two, I'm not sure which. What's the problem statement that everyone comes in with when they come to talk to you?
Yeah, one of the big ones we have is there's an excited team that wants to bring developer experience to the organization and really modernize both the developers' persona and platform. But they say, how does my group make an organization impact, and how I make this attractive enough because I'm building a community around it. So I think that's one of the first things that they talk about. And another one is they ask, what does it look like in 2 years? It's very exciting to start. We're starting to see what portals are, but is this going to be a great thing in 2 years, or is it going to be a monster? So two things that really a lot of the customers come with, and good questions too.
Awesome. All right, and then for you, Satish, what problem were you trying to solve when you initially started evaluating Backstage?
Okay. There have been a lot of talks today, particularly around financial communities, a lot of automotive communities. Anybody heard about endowment effect? Or, divestiture aversion? Everything that we all own, we tend to actually provide more value to it as opposed to somebody else, right? So in other words, if I were to own something and let's say I did not own that thing, I would not have provided that much value to it. So basically the same thing happens at Ford as well, and probably at most of our organizations as well. We all are tied to our own opinions and our own ideas. So we all started journeys. I think Ford started most of the modernization journey back in 2016. So you would imagine that we have a lot of developer portals, a lot. I would say about half a dozen. So the question is, how do we actually commonize all of those things? So the endowment effort comes in because we all invested something in those portals. We don't want to get rid of them, right? So how do we commonize those things? And that's what Backstage provides us, right? So now that brings us all together, saying that there is a reason for us to collaborate. Now we can all learn from the community. There's some of the biggest benefits that we realize that why we need to invest in some of those technologies.
Awesome. All right, thank you. Randeep, could you share one of the success stories that you've had with some of the customers?
Yeah, I'd love to. So this is a healthcare organization that I've been partnering with for about 3 years now. And at the beginning of the journey, we started the journey to cloud together, and their primary use case was to drive advanced analytics and leverage their data, right? So started building a lot of cloud foundations, and over a period of time, trying to balance standardization and security, the developer experience got lost, and what we started seeing, the uptime for any new environment or a service was anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to, how your prayers are answered and who do you know in the organization, right? So why is it up to the development teams or data scientists to figure out, how do I get a package in or, whatever, right? So we really took a persona-driven approach. We looked at two different personas. One is the Center of Digital Health developer and a data scientist. And we define the most high-frequency use cases for them and build catalog items around it. And right around about that time, we were looking at portals, and this was early 2021. So Spotify had just recently open sourced it. So we started partnering with Spotify and brought in Backstage and launched it with 2 use cases and with a vision of one day, one ticket. So we wanted to stand up environments. Just like in the last talk, which, the final experience was less than 1 day. So that's what we were striving for. And for, at least to start with, for 2 use cases, we were able to get there. So you're building a microservice on GKE. You're on Kubernetes, you get there in less than a day. You want a data science environment that can be connected to a larger, your organization-specific model hosting environment. It gets stood up and connected pretty, integrated correctly. So yeah, so big pain point, big resolution. And you can quantify all the engineering hours and calculate the business ROI for it, which is pretty significant.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to ask a quick question for the audience. Can you put up your hand if your company is currently either POCing or utilizing Backstage? Just out of curiosity. Okay, a decent amount of hands. Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to go over to Christophe and ask you just a quick question around what are some of the key things that you see our team at Red Hat kind of contributing in the Backstage community and/or in the Janus community?
Yes, so the Janus community, we have several work streams. So we are providing a Helm chart where you can deploy, install Backstage a lot faster, and especially with OpenShift. We also give a version of Backstage preloaded with all the command plugins, several golden path templates that will contain all the best practices. We have a custom homepage, lots of different features that will be already integrated. So you can get started within minutes instead of weeks. We also have several plugins that are available, such as the topology, Quay, Tecton plugins.
Great, thank you. And this going back to Deloitte, in your opinion, what are the key features maybe that need to be worked on Backstage in the Upstream area?
Yeah, I think one of it is the relationship of a template and a catalog item that's spun out of a template. You create a template and then maybe 10 people utilize it, maybe 100 people utilize it. When a new template version comes out, now how do you react? Or as a template creator, how do you see who's used your items and let them know that there are new updates or impacts that they can have related to it? So I think that's one thing that they could use a little bit more of the relationship management, the communication management, and then how do you adopt changes and how do you roll those changes out at scale? A lot of customers have questioned that. Now it's out in the wild and I have 50 copies of something, I need to make a change. Now I'm coordinating with 50 people and I've kind of come full circle to the previous experience. So that's one thing that I think they could do some changing. The other is Backstage is an interactive platform with other external products. So they have an authorization within Backstage, but a common problem we have is you integrate with not only external applications, but you might have 20 teams and 10 environments, or 20 teams and 20 environments. So how does the authorization go out and find, I can only make additions or changes to my environment or my team's environment? And so I think that's something where the authorization model, starting off in Backstage is good, but it's a common problem once you leave that, how does that interact? And how do you provide those safe, curated, compliant frameworks? That's kind of another thing. And then the last one I would say as a community member, because Backstage, every time you implement it, you're really building the product. You're making plugin additions at source code level. We've all had to make that Backstage upgrade. And especially in the early days, it's not very fun when services are breaking. So I think thinking about the upgrade path and where can you create protected zones and extended zones and allow for all of us making our own developer portals, or for Randeep and I making developer portals for many customers. Ultimately, your portal is going to be different from yours, but Backstage is upstream to all of us. So how do you create that ability to empower the developer community to make their own portals and not just make it a hell for a platform team trying to make a DevX experience? And we're all trying to keep up with Spotify. You know, they have really great ideas, but 2.0 is coming out and a lot of changes. So I think those three things would really help us and then also allow us to give back in those ways to Spotify. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And Satish, I had a question around, in your company, how many groups are actually contributing plugins to Backstage?
I think right
and
now,
what problems might you have because of that?
Like quite a few groups, actually. That's, I think, it's fair to say that at least about half a dozen teams are working on different groups completely, contributing some of those things. I think the biggest problems would be is like, how do we actually package a plugin? Right. It's simple. I'm like, it's a Node.js app, so every time I need to make a change, I need to talk to somebody. It's, as you said, I need to know somebody who can actually build that thing, deploy it. And I think that's the biggest problem. I think the other one you talked about earlier was like Auth and Auth-Z. How do I plug into all these OpenShift clusters? I have 60, 70, 80 of them. I have GKE clusters. How do I plug into all of these things, right? So it kind of goes back to the same problem that we always had, is like these islands of innovation. How do I string them all together? I hope that we will be able to find solutions. I'm very optimistic that we will be able to find solutions, considering that this problems doesn't not just besiege Ford anymore, right? It besieges everybody, every one of us. I think those were the big things from our point of view.
Okay, awesome. And Christophe, could you maybe talk about any of the community discussions around some of the plugin issues that we just heard about?
So yes, in the Janus community, we're talking with the Backstage Upstream community for something we call the dynamic plugins. So that's just to allow you to install plugins, front-end and back-end, without having to rebuild and redeploy Backstage. So.
Awesome. All right, and then I was also going to ask if you have any other thoughts around what you think is missing from the Backstage community that might be, good things for people to start collaborating on in the Upstream area, whether that's plugins or.
I think there is one experience thing that I would say is that I think a lot of the things we talked about in terms of developing onboarding and dev enablement, as at least within Ford we call as like dev enablement, some of the other speakers talked about dev services, is like there's a common pattern. So it'll be nice to see that there are there out of the box itself in the catalog, right? Instead of we developing this thing over and over again, I'm sure there are common practices that are evolving that'll help us instead of redeveloping all of those things. Why not just build a catalog of things, right? So that would be a great thing, saying that, hey, let's start with something that comes out of the box rather than trying to build it after the fact.
One more thing is that some things that we've been hearing when we're talking to customers is our key use cases now trending to be more around changing things through Backstage. So for example, we've been asked, can we rerun a pipeline? Can we restart a build? Curious if the two of you have heard things like that and how you think trends are changing.
Yeah, I can start, and Adam, you can add in. So very specific use case. How do you increase your quota in a namespace, right? So that is an interesting use case because that's more in the life cycle of, it's beyond the onboarding and beyond the service start. Then there is anything to do with certificate lifecycle management, right? So these are atomic services, right? Now they could be independent services and catalog items, but they are also sometimes part of your full team onboarding and service provisioning, specifically the certificate example. So there's also a trend around like how do you wrap like an API or like a service model around your underlying platform automation, right? Because you have a very heterogeneous set of services. So some of them are part of your lifecycle and others are part of your onboarding. So how do you kind of bring them all together? I think that's, but two very specific ones. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll wrap it into my Auth-Z point, where you go to a general services team like your source code manager, you say, I need a read all or create repo. Great. Now I need an edit repo. They're like, not sure about that. I need some cube level to make a restart. Not sure about that, right? So it really, I think Backstage showed people what day 2 through 100 looks like from a templating standpoint, where it's not just here, good luck, see you later. My plugins tell me what's going on. I can, Jenkins has decided to restart pipelines. So I think that's all really great points. But in my opinion, if we don't solve for the auth Z, especially in my customers where the environments are disparate, then we'll have a challenge on making the case to those teams that own the system that if I put a restart button, I didn't actually accidentally hit prod. I was trying to restart dev, right? So I think that those are coupled, and then for a lot of my government customers, it's an idea of how safe do I feel like abstracting out of each one of these external products into the plugin, which right now is skim the cream off the top. Here's my pipeline, success or not, click this button, go out to it. Great flow. But then now if I'm making decisions inside the portal, I need to make sure my information is relevant. So if I make an action, I have the most up-to-date that it isn't actually running, it was previously had a problem. So I think auth-Z is a quick tie-in to that journey, and we're certainly going to get there. It's a national point to say, I want more information, am I all being, hit this tab, I can get one thing, but every step more takes more privilege, more danger, and more considerations in a very spoked environment, and it can also bring a burden onto the developer experience team that now they need to make sure they're doing it securely. And then also to the dynamic plugin is a great point of every time you add these features or new instances you connect with Argo, I got to redeploy the whole app every single time. So it's a common pain point that we're starting to see is, great, I want to get this on, and now I have to deploy constantly to make configuration level changes, and I need to bring in all these, I have a whole registry full of credentials to many environments. So I think that'll be a natural extension for the ability to bring actions into the plugins, and something that I'm interested to see the community do. But for now, mostly read-only, hand it off to a system. That system can use its own authorization to do something, and then we'll skim the cream off the top, and then a great one-click, okay, I want more information, just go to Jenkins and do it there, right? So we found that's been enough for most of our security-wary customers, but something I'm sure everyone's gonna dip their toe in and then roll back a little bit and then try again, you know? So we'll be right in the mix with everybody, you know,
Awesome.
I think one thing, if I may add, would be like, what is the line that you'll draw between what we call as ClickOps versus what actually Backstage's value is, right? So that's a fine line that we need to figure out what is that thing. And sometimes we tend to go way too far, right? As you were saying, let the systems be systems. Backstage is a great onboarding mechanism and onboarding experience rather than just saying that it is a complete experience unto itself.
Yeah, and one thing I'm actually interested if you have a point around rolling on your systems. I found that each time you create templates, organizations have to rethink about the way their app is served and all the abstractions they need to make. You know, were you able to make a lot of headway with taking services and templating them, and you know, what was that like?
I think that's something that we are working on. That's the whole point of actually what we call as onboarding portals, and we have been starting to work on what we're calling as like opinionated stacks. Right, here's the opinionated stacks. I think some of the gentlemen were talking about golden paths, as Spotify calls it. The idea is that here's the one true and trusted mechanism. Yes, it is opinionated, and it is by design. It is opinionated, right? So I think we do not want to mince those words together, saying that we would want it is purposefully designed like that.